Howdy everybody. Today I'd like to do a little video about a Ford Transit Connect van that I actually built out about a year ago. Full disclaimer, this van was actually built for a family member, so I had access to it a few months later in the summer to take some video footage of it, and today I'd just like to kind of present a little overview of that conversion. Before I dive into the conversion, I'd like to just quickly cover a couple advantages that I think the Transit Connect has over the Ram ProMaster City or the Nissan NV200. At the time, those were the other two options really available that were in kind of a small cargo van kind of layout or form factor. But I think the two big advantages of the Ford Transit Connect are that the front seat can lay flat, which in this conversion will actually end up being used as part of the bed, so that's a nice space saver to be able to use that as a sleeping area. And then there's this underfloor area that, if you get the passenger version of these vans, is where the rear seats go. But when you get the cargo version, they put this false floor in over the top of it. And I've never actually worked on the Nissan NV200, but in the Ram ProMaster, this area is pretty difficult to access. But in the Ford Transit Connect, you can just remove the whole false floor, and there's just a huge cavity there that you can utilize. So in this cavity under the floor, I was able to house the 14-gallon water tank, the heater, a 200 amp hour lithium battery, and the propane tank to run both the stove and the heater. So that was that was just great. That's so much just kind of infrastructure stuff that was going to have to go somewhere in the van, and by being able to fit it all in this underfloor cavity, there's just a lot more usable space above. And that is something that I think if you're going to go into building one of these vans, it's pretty easy to look at it and go, wow, this thing's tiny compared to a full-size camper. This is going to be easy because it's essentially a third of the volume. But in my opinion, every inch saved in like a cabinet or something is just, pretty necessary because you got so little space to work with. So on to the conversion. I'm really happy with how this van turned out. The wood you're going to be seeing all throughout it is called spalted maple. It's a bit different than ambrosia maple, which is more easy to find. But spalted maple, I think just the darker lines in it are just really stunning looking. The obvious things in this layout that were necessary is that it was going to be warm and dry, so hence the heater, and then have a spot to cook. Then there was a request for a composting toilet, and finally that there was enough open floor space so that a couple dogs could sleep in it. As we start basically at the passenger seat, that passenger seat folds flat and becomes basically the lower half of the bed. This was great that this worked out because it really opens up the floor plan, so half the van isn't just a bed in the back. The cabinet that the bed sits on, from the outside, it's got a few of the electrical components mounted there for kind of the controls as well as the water fill. And then the main body of that cabinet, it's got a big top opening lid so you can put bigger items in it or just like load it quickly, and then a little front flap that you can access to maybe grab a piece of clothing out of it or something. Moving towards the rear of the van from the bed, we've got this cabinet that has a fridge in the bottom half, and the top half has got this storage cabinet. This was kind of tricky to figure out because this cabinet was going to have to access from both in front of it and behind it. So any kind of door that swings is just going to become awkward because from one side you're not going to be able to reach inside it. So for the fridge, it's like a small drawer style fridge, so you can just kind of slide that drawer out, look inside what you have. And for the top of the cabinet, I ended up going with a tambour door. This was a fun project. I'd never built one of these before, and it'd been on my list for a while. And since it was a van going to a family member, it was worth the extra time and investment. Above the fridge, I've also got this nifty little pivoting table. I think the counter space in the kitchen is really tight, so this is just a nice little area where you can set an extra plate, or maybe if you're sitting in bed, you can put a cup of coffee there. It's not heavy duty enough to chop vegetables on or anything, but it's a pretty small counter space, so I thought it was a nice little addition. Moving rearward of the van from the fridge, we've got the composting toilet, which also doubles as a seat when you're cooking. It is the C-head standard model. After doing some research, this seemed like one of the most compact and best options. The way you end up using the stirring rod, it's just really low profile, so it's very nice for these tight spaces. I did, however, modify it to plug in a little exhaust fan on the backside. On the other side of the van, we've got the kitchen essentially. The countertop is black epoxy with a piece of black walnut that I had sitting around. I think it came out really nicely. It's just got a small little sink and a 2-burner Dometic stove The faucet's pretty ugly, but they were out of black and this van needed to get done. Below that, we've got storage and drawers, and then a little open area below the sink. And on the other end of the kitchen, we've got these little cubbies for just little odds and ends, as well as, you know, the heater controls, the battery monitor, and stuff like that. About the only other thing is there's this giant skylight in the ceiling. I think it just really helps to make the van feel a little brighter. You can get fresh air in it. And then it does have a cover for when you're sleeping at night. And then on the roof, we've got a little fan that actually sits right above the kitchen. And then we've got a 170 watt solar panel for charging the batteries. And that's about it. It's a tiny little van. The whole conversion weighed 580 pounds, so that's well within the van's capacity. It was a lot of fun to build, and thanks for watching, guys.